Hello everybody and welcome back to our lecture series. I'm Ted, your host, and for this lecture we are going to look at the creation of the Soviet Empire, as it's sometimes called, but it's the Iron Curtain countries is another block as another word used to describe it. The Eastern Bloc is another phrase used to describe it, and these are the satellite states created in Eastern Europe by the Soviet Union in the wake of World War II. In past lectures and in past fast facts, we alluded to the fact that the Soviets under the direction of Joseph Stalin had moved into various countries in Eastern Europe, most notably Czechoslovakia and Poland and the Ukraine, in an effort to create land defenses to block the land routes of invading armies. Twice before, in World War One and in World War Two, these countries have been the access avenues, so to speak, of invasions into Western Russia. The hard lesson for the Soviets in World War Two was that it was far too easy for invading armies to maneuver across these countries, and that just as for the United States, the Marshall Plan was to play a role in maintaining their economic health, uh, in installing friendly pro-Soviet governments in these countries would be beneficial to the Soviet foreign policy and to the Soviet national health. It would The Soviets were determined not to fight wars on their own on Russian soil, but to fight wars in these countries, to have all the heavy fighting done outside of Russia proper. Um, and so, really, by the Yalta Conference, by February 1945, they were putting armies in place to ensure that political rivals to communist leaders, anybody that Joseph Stalin deemed a threat, would be assassinated or driven out of the country. We look at we look at the acquisition and the holding of a large portion of Eastern Germany, really centered on the old Prussian province of Brandenburg, the acquisition of the entirety of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary. All of these countries and much more became Soviet satellite states. Yugoslavia under Tito remained semi-independent, but it too was aligned very heavily with the Soviet Union, and its policies were very closely aligned to those policies favored by the Soviet Union. So you had this very large chunk of Eastern Europe, really all of Eastern Europe, in Soviet hands, um, and used by the Soviets as a buffer zone. Soviet acquisition and Soviet control over the territory were not easy in their effort to consolidate their hold over the country. They faced very hard fought hard pressed revolts in the 40s and the 50s and in the 60s, most notably the Czech revolts of 1948 and 1968, and of course the Great Hungarian Revolt of 1956, all of which were brutally repressed by the Soviets. And while this was going on, the United States really couldn't offer any sort of aid or even offer an objection to these Soviet actions because of the nuclear stalemate, because of that standoff that was then in effect. And of course, the Soviets, once they came into these regions, particularly in Poland, they kept alive a lot of the Nazi concentration camps. And just as Adolf Hitler had once sent his political adversaries to these camps, so too did Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin found this to be a very easy and a very quick and expedient mean to handle his political adversaries and their followers. And that's our quick, fast fact on this Soviet Empire. A lot more can be said about it. It's one of the more fascinating aspects of the foreign policy revolutions of the two superpowers. The United States, of course, had their own foreign policy diplomatic revolution with the decision to not retreat from Europe and to invest heavily into the future of Western Europe. About $12 billion will be allocated for the economic redevelopment of Western Europe by the United States. And of course, the Soviet Union took this very, very huge step of acquiring these satellite states to serve as buffer zones, to prevent easy access, to prevent a very quick invasion of the Soviet Union. And of course, the Soviet Union sent large numbers of Soviet troops into these countries to serve up, to reinforce the notion that these were land route buffer zones, to give no quick access to the Soviet Union. And as always, hit like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you thought about this fast fact. And as always, I am Ted, and I will see you guys next time for another fast fact.